Welcome everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good day, wherever you are. You are most welcome in attending this lunch lecture, or the webinar as we call it in modern English. The title of today is Hydraulic Engineering in Argentina. That is where it is about. It is a large country with 5,000 or more kilometers of maritime coastline, has many lakes and expensive floodplain areas. It has about 1,600 kilometers of stretch of the Paraná-Paraguay waterway. It connects 5 South American economies. And that is already an indication why hydraulic engineering plays a crucial role for the sustainable development. It's the 8th largest country in the world measured in area. The speaker of today is Pablo Arecco. He's civil engineer from the University of Buenos Aires and as a master hydraulic engineer from TU Delft. I already knew him as a student here many years ago. We went on a field work together, Bulgaria and Romania. And he will showcase the country's main hydraulic infrastructures projects, so Argentina, and providing some insights on the main characteristics, existing challenges, and the research opportunities that they may offer. I guess, Pablo, you will give some backgrounds about yourself as part of your presentation. So I'll give you the floor and invite you to share your screen so we can follow your story. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark. Good morning, goedemiddag for everybody, for Alex. It's a pleasure to be here today, and thanks for the invite to all of you, and to have this opportunity to share a little bit of our experience in South America and the infrastructure around here. Just to start, the topic of today and the idea of today is doing a small tour through the hydraulic engineering infrastructure in Argentina, and especially to highlight research opportunities for the students, professors, and researchers from our countries. So I hope this is a teaser or can trigger your minds to join us and to keep strengthening cooperation between our universities. Just a small table of contents of today. I will start very briefly with a long-lasting partnership between the University of Buenos Aires, especially of the school, the postgraduate school of ports and waterways, and TU Delft. Then what I mentioned, a brief tour of Argentina's, especially directed for hydraulic engineers, and then just closing part and open discussion. Just to make a little bit of background of why we are giving this presentation here, and from where this is, or all this has started. Basically, we are talking, or I am talking on behalf of the Postgraduate School of Port Engineering of the Faculty of Engineering of the University of Buenos Aires. The University of Buenos Aires is one of the oldest universities in Argentina. This year ages 200 years. And it's the first university ranked in the QS within the Spanish-speaking world. It's rather massive, around 300,000 students in 13 independent faculties spread all over Buenos Aires city. And specifically our Ports and Waterways postgraduate course is directed for all the Latin American and Spanish-speaking world, as we give it in Spanish. And it started already 60 years ago, and it's a postgraduate course of 1 year, 14 months duration. But how all this started? Many years ago, engineers from Argentina did some masters and some research together in the Netherlands. Even they traveled by vessel. That was in the 60s. Then the National Water Institute of Argentina was created in late 60s with the support of United Nations, and especially with the support on all the maritime parts from Delft Hydraulic Laboratory, where one of the key engineers from Argentina, Raúl Escalante, did a postgraduate stage over there in the 70s. Later on, many other colleagues, some of them are present today, like Carlos Ginés or Pablo Arecco, did their masters as well in EGIP in Delft. And they have, for example, some of the key professors or famous names from the Netherlands, like Rien Groeneveld, as mentors of their thesis. All this loop closed up in 1999, when Raúl Escalante became the director of the Port Engineering School of the University of Buenos Aires. Furthermore, we strengthened the bonds between our countries and institutions by the means of PIANC, and especially with the friendship across our colleagues. In the year 2004, we started with the first courses and seminars from professors of TU Delft in Argentina, and we started also with the first master thesis and multidisciplinary projects in the country. Then, due to this long-lasting cooperation, I had the chance to study over there my master's and meet many of you, and it was one of the greatest moments in my professional career. And nowadays, another very good colleague is studying is Sebastián Iglesias, and he's also today with us. Just in order to keep the continuation of these initiatives, in the year 2017, we signed an MOU between our both universities. This is a cooperation agreement in order to promote exchange of information, teaching staff, and students. So this presentation is within this framework in order to promote for Dutch students to come to Argentina to do their master thesis or multidisciplinary projects. Just to give a brief example of how are these activities done together, every year or every 2 years in Buenos Aires, professors from TU Delft are coming for a week and giving 2 or 3 days courses, and then one open seminar for the whole community on what we call the TU Delft EGIP week in Buenos Aires city. Many professors has come, and I would like to thank all of them, especially those that really supported in many years, like Hanlik Tenningen, Rien Groeneveld, Han Freilin, Henk-Jan Verhagen, Peter Quist, and especially Tido Fellinger, who was my mentor in my master thesis. And for this year, due to the COVID, it's not feasible to professors from TU Delft to come to Argentina, but we are organizing in October a webinar with them, especially with Bas Hofland and Mark van Koningsveld, and I invite many of the present to come in the future years. To say this, I will jump directly to the content-wise of this presentation, and I will try to explain or to give an overview of some of the key facts on Argentina. It's a rather large country. Yep.
Pablo, sorry to interrupt you. There can be some questions in the chat. Do you want to answer them directly or after your presentation?
As you wish, Mark. If there's any question, we can
well,
answer.
Yeah, there's one question already now from Jos, actually. He was interested in this memorandum of understanding, if it was signed between the universities or between the schools and the faculties.
It is signed between the faculties of our universities, the Faculty of Engineering of the University of Buenos Aires and the Faculty of Civil Engineering and Geoscience of TU Delft.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Pablo.
Okay. Just moving ahead with this, as I was mentioning, Argentina is in the southern part of the world, or in the bottom of the world. If we see in the typical conventional way, we can turn around and we are in the top, but it's a funny story only. So it's the 8th largest country in the world when we are talking about territory, with only 45 million inhabitants, and quite not well distributed all over this large country. Especially on our production as a country itself is basically related to agricultural, farming, and agro-industry or bio-based industry. We have a throughput of around 170 million tons through all our ports. Just to make a comparison, it is only 1/3 of the throughput of the port of Rotterdam. So to put some figures and to make some contrast, and we are only moving in Argentina around 2 million TEUs, mainly through the port of Buenos Aires. What may be understood of all this situation is that it's a huge country with many possibilities to be developed. And here, some other figures, especially talking about the large basins that are crossing the southern part of South America. Here you can see what is called Rio de la Plata, or the River Plate Basin, that it contains a waterway network, one of the major waterway networks all over the world. Only with the waterway of the Paraná and Paraguay River, we are talking about 3,500 kilometers going through 5 countries. And then you have many other branches like the Alto Paraná and with the Hidrovía Paraná-Tieté, connecting to the hinterland of São Paulo as well, but with a physical interruption between Argentina and Brazil, where the Itaipu Dam is located without locks. Furthermore, on the Uruguay River, just dividing and consisting the border between Argentina and Uruguay, there's also a waterway up to another big dam in between our countries, Salto Grande, and it does not have locks as well. And on top of that, we need also to consider all the navigation channels in Rio de la Plata, that is the main estuary of the Paraná and Uruguay rivers. Just to give an idea, and we will see later on in some pictures, but the waterway network in Rio de la Plata is around 300 kilometers of navigational channels. So all these areas in total are 32 million hectares of agricultural lands, around 8 times the surface of the Netherlands. And well, it's one of the main productive agricultural areas in the world. Just to move ahead with this is a small picture of a big dam. It's the second world largest hydroelectric dam in the world. It's Itaipu Dam in the border between Brazil and Paraguay. And why I am stressing this facilities? Well, first of all, because it's blocking the navigation in the Paraná River. And there are some studies conducted by Dutch companies and local companies on establishing locks in this complex or in this dam, but it's a process that needs to move ahead in the coming years. Further on, and I think with this, Jos, I can answer a little bit your question. I will talk about a little bit the Paraná River discharge and water levels. And the mentioning of the Itaipu Dam and the big dams in Brazil really affected the discharge of the Paraná River. So of the 120 years of records we have of river discharge in the country, after the construction of the dams, you see a clear effect on what are the minimum values of this river discharge. So when you analyze this series, nowadays you need to work with the period from 1970 to 2020, because all the previous ones were the natural flows without all the regulations in the river. When we are talking about mean flow discharge, we are talking about 19,000 cubic meters per second. And that's the mean, the average flow discharge. So I think this is shown in one of the part upstream, but as it is happening in the Netherlands and all over the world, climate change is affecting all these systems, and especially when we have El Niño or La Niña in South America. So just to mention a few extremes, in 2016, We have extreme high waters. It was the second largest Paraná River high discharge recorded, with around 40,000 cubic meters per second during a month, and an average of 13 to 35,000 cubic meters per second for more than 2 months. So here are a few photos of what happened, but the Hastings floating plants travel from Paraguay and Mato Grosso around 2,500 kilometers downstream to Buenos Aires city. So, well, it was interesting to see all the marinas and our downtown with tropical animals and Hastings all over. So it was kind of unique. And nowadays, last year and this year, we are suffering the counter effects. It's the extreme low waters with an average flow of 7,000 cubic meters per second. And basically on the main waterways, we are experiencing draft reductions in the order of 15, 20% nowadays. So it's really affecting the competitiveness and the logistics of the country. But when we are talking about draft, it's important to go back to the general picture of the Paraguay-Paraná waterway. And here you can see the 3,400 kilometers stretch. And what is important to stress is that the first 700 kilometers, well, a little bit more, 800 kilometers, seagoing vessels can sail into the continent. It's rather unique and special, with the draft up to 34 feet or 10.3 meters. And then from Santa Fe to the north, as you can see here in the picture, is the inland barges convoys area with a draft of 7 to 10 feet. So, and there's a huge potential, and it's one of the main logistic corridors in South America, with a throughput of over 120 million tons on the rivers. So here, as you may imagine, there are quite some research topics to be done, but we envision that there's an opportunity for a master thesis here on studying bank erosion in the Paraná River, risk mitigation and protection measures in different areas where this may be needed. Moving ahead, and now going from upstream to downstream, I will focus a little bit on the inland barges area, where the large convoys of non-propelled barges with tugboats are sailing. This strait, it's about 1,000 kilometers. It's a dynamic area for the adaptation of the navigational channel, following the morphological changes of the river. And basically navigation is possible and enhanced by implementing around 350 aids to navigation in this stretch. So there are opportunities to research around here. And just to give you an idea of the size of the barge convoys, here are some figures. We are talking in the Argentine stretch of these areas of convoys of 6x7 barges. That means 70 meters beam and around 500 meters length. So these convoys can carry around 65,000 tons of soybean downstream the rivers. And then here we reach the key area where the inland barges route conveys with the seagoing vessels route in the port of Santa Fe. In this area, there are a few studies. There can be studies of hydrosedimentation on the river, on the access channel, dredging optimization, a study of relocation of the port as is enclosed by the city, and reusing part of the former port areas to develop port-city interaction and marina development. So these are a few topics that can be addressed. And from this point downstream, it's where the Paraná-Paraguay waterways takes some impressive magnitude in my point of view, as these Panamax vessels can be in the middle of our agricultural fields, 800 kilometers from the ocean. And this is one of the largest dredging, maintenance dredging, and H2 navigation contracts all over the world, as it is a concession given for the last 25 years in order to maintain all the navigation conditions in our waterways. It's on a stretch, as I mentioned, of 800 kilometers. These huge developments that were done in the 90s, the concession started in 1995, allow the settlement of quite important terminals in the upriver area in what we call the port industrial complex of Gran Rosario. This area, it contains around 30 port terminals where around 80% of all Argentina's grain and Paraguayan grains, flour, oils, and biofuels export are concentrated, with around 2,600 calls of seagoing vessels. And over there, it's the world's largest export hub for agribulks and bio-based industry, with around 80 million tons of output in 2019. So it's quite impressive, and it's all on fresh water, but with seagoing vessels. And what is an advantage here is that the scale of transport of seagoing vessels brought really close to the production areas made the competitiveness of all this region to put our production into the world in a competitive way. Also in this area of Rosario, and before going ahead, I can answer to Leon. Yes, there are some activities on fixing the river, but it's more natural dynamics. There are some protections where the cities are located, but mostly it's a natural river. It's not heavily regulated as you may find in Europe or in the Mississippi Basin. It is more a nature-based river with minor activity regarding regulation of the river itself, aside of the big dams that were constructed upstream in the Paraná Basin. So going back to the area and to the Rosario area, also you may find the Rosario City Port that is within one of the two largest cities outside of Buenos Aires, where some activities are heavily important because it's one of the multipurpose ports in the region, and there are many research opportunities over there. The port authorities in this area are also willing to support some initiatives from students, either from Argentina and the Netherlands. Some of this research can be on the development of new port areas, port expansion or port city integration, or just planning for new logistics or dry ports, as the port is rather surrounded by the city itself. So the next one, it's for me a beautiful picture of how navigation can be seen in this area, where you are on a Panamax vessel and inland barges are just surrounded by nature. This is the natural banks of the Paraná River. And also, you may see in the coming slide a small video of what the captains, and especially the Argentine captains that are advising the captain of the vessel, are sailing through the river. This is a small video, and you can see the automatic identification system track on top of it, of this through the meanders of seagoing vessels in a river. But this can be a little bit more complicated when you have fog. So aids to navigation and virtual aids to navigation, it's a key matter for our waterways. Then we reach to the huge area of the Paraná and Uruguay River Delta. It's massive, 14,000 square kilometers, with around 160 million tons of sediment flow per year, as the river discharge and sediment charge is not affected by dams or not interrupted. Still, the delta of the Paraná River is growing at rates of around 100 meters per year. So islands are moving ahead quite fast. And here there are quite some research topics as well that can be interesting. And the National Water Institute is willing to support some of these activities, like implementation of 3D models to analyze flow patterns in bifurcations and confluences, comparison with in situ data. Also, well, studying a few things that then you can read later on. I will not go through all the details and possibilities, but just to mention a few. These are a few pictures, the ones that are coming regarding the Paraná Delta lifestyles, that it has quite some interesting peculiarities. It's a tiny Venecia in South America, but with more warm weather and more nature than in Venecia and less historical background. You can see passenger ferries, some polder communities living, but different to the polder in the Netherlands, more real estate developed polders for real estate business. And well, here there are as well some nice topics for research, because all this area has quite some recreational navigation activities. So and there's quite some people living with the schools in the islands, and all the life goes in the water. So some short-term forecasting or some morphodynamic relationships in the small channels in the delta is also desired to keep studying. Then from the delta, we move to the estuary, where the Paraná and the Uruguay River converge. This estuary is called Rio de la Plata, or the River Plate Basin, or the River Plate Estuary, I mean. Basically, this small part of the river connects our both countries, Argentina and Uruguay. But in front of the city of Buenos Aires to Uruguay, we have 40 kilometers. In the mouth of the estuary, we have 200 kilometers, that it's around Montevideo, where it is located here in the image. The average mean flow in Rio de la Plata is around 22,000 cubic meters per second. So with this, you can have an idea of what is the river system around this area, and where some of the main ports for containers and multipurpose terminals are located in our country, including the Port of Buenos Aires, with the different terminals in the surrounding areas. And well, here there are many challenges to be addressed, like port planning and expansion of these port areas. Also dredging of contaminated sediments, because we didn't care much for the last century of our environment. So there are a few topics that needs to be solved. And this can be continued for previous studies done by students, from Dutch students, with Tito Fellinga and professors from Argentina here. But also, we have quite some interesting topics to be developed regarding capacity analysis of the inland waterway channels in the River Plate. This network of 300 kilometers of navigational channels in the River Plate, it has a big opportunity to do a traffic study and performance operations of the whole network. So for us, this is a very interesting topic for a master thesis research in the area. So, well, of course, there are topics related with dredging and with passing ship and many other activities in this area. So this is something that can be developed further on. Then just I will leave a little bit the riverside, and I will jump into our Argentine Sea and the coast. First, I will start with the coast of the province of Buenos Aires. Just to give you an idea, the province of Buenos Aires is about the size of Spain. So, and it's one of the most productive provinces in Argentina. And you can find around 600 kilometers of coast of what you can see highlighted here. But then you have another stretch of 200 kilometers of coastline in this area. All this coast has been studied between the National Water Institute of Argentina and the INFI in Uruguay for many years in order to understand all the coastal erosion in some critical areas and to understand the coastal evolution. And there are many topics to be done in this area or to be studied in this area, like implementing new monitoring tools, using traditional methods as well. Also, there's some studies already carried on and that can be continued with the design of marinas along the province of Buenos Aires coastline. So it's pretty huge, the topics that can be addressed. I've seen, and before going ahead, I've seen two questions here. Incidents in the past due to fog. Well, sometimes not due to fog, because now everything it's can be managed with electronic charts, navigation charts, and all the aids to navigation and systems in the area are in the waterways are really well maintained. But of course, in a waterway, there are sometimes some minor incidents when the engine of a vessel just stop suddenly by a problem in the vessel, or well, some maneuverings that can be a little bit complicated, but there are not any type of big casualties or big problems on the waterways. But if you want, at the end, we can expand a little bit more, because I know that some of the colleagues here are the ones managing the waterway, so they can explain even better to you than I can do. Regarding sea level rise affect the growth of the delta, Martine, that's a very good question, and perhaps it's a nice research topic to do together with the guys from and the ladies of the National Water Institute in Argentina. Of course, it will affect in many cases, but to what extent? Well, it's something that needs to be further studied, at least so far my knowledge. So sometimes when we are talking about these topics, it's not that easy to collect funds in Argentina to this type of research. And well, we need to put a lot of efforts on that. So it will be great to do this kind of studies together. Moving a little bit ahead, and just not to take much of the time and leaving some for the discussion at the end, I would like to move a little bit southwards to the largest port in Argentina. Or the largest port complex in Argentina is the port of Bahía Blanca. It's the largest petrochemical hub in our country and the 5th largest in South America. Is extremely well connected with all the oil and gas reservoirs in Patagonia, conventional and non-conventional areas. And further on, this port is a complement to all the logistic scheme for the agri, bulk, and bio-based industry exports of our country. I mentioned before, the Panamax vessels can sail with 10.3 feet in the Paraná River, but they will leave the Paraná River only with 60% of their cargo. So they need to complete their, and top off the vessel somewhere else. Well, they come to these ports in the south of Argentina, or go to ports in Brazil, where they can complete and top off up to 100% of the vessel. So that means with the draft of 45 feet, or 13.5 meters. So that's a little bit how this logistic scheme works in Argentina. But also, this port is located in a rather large estuary, a sensitive area, is a nature reserve area, and it's one of the main birds migration spots in the whole American continent, with birds migrating from Canada and the United States and flying 13,000 kilometers south in summertime and arriving to this area. So, well, there are many topics, and quite a lot of students have been working in this port due to the big support of the Port Authority in this area. Then just going to the colder areas now, approaching a little bit to the Patagonian Argentine coast. Nowadays, it's rather chilly over there. We have, I don't know, I think in 0 degrees or below 0. But there are opportunities also to study the potential development and logistics serving to green hydrogen developments in Patagonia and the export from Argentina. Patagonia is rather windy, just as the Netherlands, or a little bit more. So windmills are a good possibility. And just the main difference is that there's more sheep than human beings over there, because it's where wool is also produced to be exported all over the world. So there's not so much pressure from society to develop some windmills on land. So there's a huge potential of energy production over there. And then keep moving a little bit south. We arrived to where Sebastián Iglesias is, to the area of Puerto Madryn, Trelew. There are ports over there, but also it's one of the main wildlife sanctuaries in the southern hemisphere. It's where it's called Puerto Madryn. And the next slide, it's highlighting a small video. I hope you can see it nicely, of the port and the port expansion, with the whales just jumping next to the port expansion. So, well, that's a luxury that Sebastián and the engineers working in Patagonia may enjoy, especially in this area. So, as you can imagine, combining port activities with wildlife, there are many challenges to be addressed. Besides, there are quite some tidal differences. It's in a Gulf area, so tidal propagation in the Gulf and improving all forecasts, it's interesting. It's also our main aluminum factory, and our only aluminum factory in Argentina, located over there. So logistics are rather important. And of course, and Mark, Martine, and everybody, this area, it will be great to do an integrated coastal zone management approach in order to address all this with a little bit the Dutch perspective on how to learn from you and to keep all these preserved for the next generations to come. Also, there are fisheries in all this area. Fisheries in Patagonia and the Argentine Sea platform are really important. So this can be another topic where you can focus with coastal erosion and coastal protection situations, siltations, among other topics that can be addressed. This is one of the small fishery harbors that you can find in Patagonia. For sure, and what we were discussing before starting, one of the big advantages of cooperating between our countries is the experience students and professors and researchers may have when they visit these beautiful places as well. And we are not talking about the food yet, but then we can leave it for the end. Another ideas that came to our mind when we were preparing this presentation, because this is the effort of many of us, just to share a little bit of the possibilities that we can work together. We were focusing also on some of the areas in northern Patagonia, but just leaving the ocean, going to the lakes, to the mountain areas. And here there are possibilities in the mountain areas also to study link connections with ferries, even connecting cities in Argentina, but even lake connections to Chile, using the huge network of lakes that you may find in this area. So just to give you an idea how it looks like, and many colleagues from that region are willing to support as well and to provide local support. These are some of the autonomous planes that we can use for research and to find locations in the area. And this is a little bit the landscape, how it looks like over there. And now, yes, reaching almost to the end of the world. In the southern part of Argentina, now there's the construction of 2 large hydro dams in the country. These dams are called Condor Cliff and La Barrancosa, are done by Chinese investments. Is the largest Chinese investments abroad China in the world. So it's pretty massive what is going on over there, and combining with many Argentine engineers working in the area. And there are some topics interesting to be studied, but especially, for example, looking for nature-based protection, slope protection of the abutments in this Patagonian landscape. It's a challenge, and it's something that they would like to study here. And then just we reached to the Furland, or the Fireland, or Tierra del Fuego. It's the last part of Argentina and the gateway to Antarctica. So there are many topics, and I pointed out only one here. To reach the island, and especially the Argentine part of the island, we need to use the connection and the roads in Chile. So there are some studies conducted and ongoing in order to use sea ferries on the Argentine Sea in order to have alternatives. But also the most southern city in the world is located in the Fireland, and it's as I mentioned before, the gateway for all cruises to Antarctica. So there are topics around this area that can be addressed as well. So all in all, I wanted to conclude with the last picture. Is in what we call Isla de los Estados, but for you, perhaps it's more familiar, Staten Island. Yes, it was discovered by the Dutch together with Cap Horn when they were trying to reach the East Indies by a different route, by Cape Town. So they discovered and named this area. And this is the lighthouse that you may know from Julio Verne or Jules Verne, the lighthouse of the end of the world. It's located in the Staten Island. So all this is possible basically because the University of Buenos Aires, and especially the Faculty of Engineering and the School of Port Engineering, is supporting this program together with TU Delft. Then the Bianca Argentina is a key partner here. Of course, the embassy is all the time supporting, and the Dutch Argentine Chamber of Commerce, that has over 100 years of history in our country, is also supporting these initiatives. So here, a last slide before discussing what we can do or what we can offer. type of project, master thesis, multidisciplinary project, per year, I don't know, we can receive 2, 1, 3 maximum group of students, 1 thesis. That's what we can do, but it's something on demand. So it's up to you guys. Well, you can contact me. You have my contact details, and this will be available. Of course, all this will depend a little bit on the situation we are living. And that's all. I hope you enjoy this lunch lecture.
Okay, thank you very much, Pablo.
Okay.
Interesting journey along the coastline and the rivers and lakes of Argentina. It's very impressive. It's a really big country and a lot of challenges. And I hope that the students that are watching, and maybe it's recorded so they can watch it later, they will use it and contact you, because these are really typical engineering problems. So they can consider this as challenges. So maybe the people present have questions. Well, maybe in the chat.
Yeah, I do have a question.
Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation. It was very interesting, and it seems there's a lot of interesting research topics. The question I have is about the Paraná River. It goes through a few countries, and I also saw there are some dams really on the border of some countries located. Do you know there is a certain collaboration or cooperation between countries, Argentina or Paraguay, concerning the water management or the influence of such dams, for instance?
Yes, there's collaboration. However, governance needs to be improved. But there's quite some committees working together between the 5 countries. Some of them dealing with the development of the logistics and the inland waterway transport. Some of them with the water management, and there's cooperation between the countries. Sometimes what is really lacking is the technical background for the politicians discussing in these governance bodies. It's something that will repeat all over in South America and Latin America and many other countries or regions in the world. So that's something that may happen. But just to give you an example, nowadays, with the extreme low water levels in the Paraná, the Paraguayan fleet, or the Paraná river fleet, that it's the 3rd largest in the world, over 3,000 inland barges in the area, well, has quite some restrictions on navigation. Therefore, they discuss at government level, and the big dams in Brazil and Argentina are opening their sluices and just releasing water to allow navigation downstream, and leaving aside their main purpose, that it's the generation or the energy supply.
Yeah, I see.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
No,
Okay.
no problem.
More questions. There was one in the chat from Jos about these discharges. I've seen some figures coming by, so 40,000 to 7,000 cubic meters per second. Do you want to have more details, Jos, about minimum, maximum discharge?
Well, no, not really, but I was looking at these graphs, and it looks like the amount of water passing by has increased. So if you take if the surface area be under these bars, it looks like it was really more than before. So I was a bit surprised to see that.
Yeah, well,
the
regulation upstream.
Sorry?
Sorry, Mark.
So Jos, you're wondering if it changed over time?
Yeah.
Yeah, if we go back just to that slide, like basically the regulation of the dams upstream are huge dams, and basically they increase the minimum discharge or downstream of the rivers, because they have quite some retained capacity. So they regulated the river much more. And then, of course, on the extremes, it also influenced all the situation with climate change as well. So there's more water coming indeed.
Okay. Again, if it comes to change and climate change, so the focus in the Netherlands now very much, and also if it comes to inland shipping, is on climate change. In your presentation, it was not very prominent. Is it? I mean, I recognize, for example, the green hydrogen production. So there is some influence of, let's say, the energy transition. But climate change and developing adaptive policies for example, inland shipping, or I didn't really see that back in your presentation. Is that something still lacking, or is other universities doing that, or?
No, it's a very nice question, and it's very difficult to answer. Sometimes the problems we are facing, it's, for example, lacking basic infrastructure in many senses. Just the need of big developments or minor developments are a huge effort to be done by all the engineers in the country. And it is a topic, climate change, that we are trying to bring into the policy agenda, but still there's a gap to go. Energy transition and keep naming. There are a few initiatives like LNG transformation of the inland fleet barges, trying to do some transition on the energy supply. We have the plans to go more into renewable energies because Argentina is in the COP21 or in the Agreement of Paris, but still is lacking a lot of research and a lot of efforts in Argentina regarding climate adaptation and climate change and sustainable development. It's something that we need to work much more on that. When we face some of the projects, we try to bring this as our main topic, like flexible ports, sustainable development, adaptive delta management, and keep naming.
Yeah.
But it's an issue, the technical combination with the governance combination. Okay. It's one of the challenges in the region. Yes.
Thank you, Pablo.
More questions? No, everything was clear apparently, Pablo. So you gave a great presentation.
Okay.
Mark, if I may?
Yeah.
So you were mentioning about this long coastline and also the erosion problems that you have there. Are the policies currently directed at maintaining or nourishing or its retreat? Could you say something about that? How?
Shall I be Dutch in this answer? So far, my understanding, there's no policy from the central government or the provincial government on this sense. Sometimes in the coast of the province of Buenos Aires, some hard structural interventions, some nourishment, but not continuity from one period or one government to the other, and it's one of the big problems, as I mentioned to Jos a few minutes ago. It's one of the big problems on governance that we are facing in Argentina, where there's no continuity on technical decisions and key aspects of the country. It's a pity, Martina.
Yeah.
But,
work to do.
And it's a very, very nice presentation with beautiful pictures. And I was really jealous at Sebastian's office.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can show you also a picture of whales jumping. But yeah, regarding your question, Martina, also, I also think that nature-based solutions is a completely changing the mindset of Argentine engineers. And that's something that I think Paulo also reflected in some of his slides. But we also would like to include how feasible it is to implement building with nature solutions, well, nature-based solutions. yeah, I think it's a great kickstart to include these topics on the discussion.
Well, I think basically, if I saw this navigation aids you have on these rivers, and you did not do much on training these rivers. I mean, many of our nature-based solutions, especially room for the river, is because we did some and maybe too much of river trading before. Huh?
Exactly.
So,
Yes.
so maybe don't start.
Yeah. Also,
Well,
the fact that you still have a growing delta, I think is also something we're quite jealous at.
Yeah. And Pablo, do you have tidal gauges on the coast where you monitor the seawater levels?
Yes, there are a few tidal gauges in Rio de la Plata, in the port of Bahia Blanca, and somewhere also downstream in the Patagonian coast.
Okay. And so, how long are the time series for these?
Oh, in port of Bahia Blanca, and the former general manager, the engineer's manager is with me, so he will not allow me to lie. But I think for the last 40 years, okay. Because the access channel was studied in a consortium of Dutch Argentine companies, including Delft Hydraulics in the past, Deltares. And when it was deepened, it was also implemented all the tidal gauges over there. And Sebastian, perhaps you can help me in the river plate. How long are the records, Sebastian Garcia, that you are over there?
Yes, systematically in a telematic way, we have 26 years of records, but much more years before there were records from traditional way, you know.
And are they? Did you analyze them for breakpoints in the sea level rise accelerations?
Not that I know, but let me check if some of the guys of the National Water Agency.
Just because we're doing that for the tide gauges on the North Sea, finding basically breakpoints in the acceleration, the rate of acceleration, with a new statistical method. So it could be interesting to have or analyze your data, or have a student analyze your data. But then 40 years, I think 40 years is something, 26 is still a bit short. But that could be of interest. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, but okay, yes. But there are a lot of things to work about this. And as Martine mentioned, well, the idea is to keep going on this exchange and this collaboration. So we are happy to contribute in the way you may consider useful. So if it's more in-depth presentations next time, or if you would like to do some presentations in Argentina, or the students to have discussions, just let us know. We are all here. And what you mentioned, Jos, and to finish myself is, well, we have the nature-based rivers, and we would like to keep it like that, and to learn of what is not a good advice to do in the rivers. So we can learn all together about this.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Okay, thank you very much. And have a look at the time. It's time to close. Maybe there's still one urgent question. And otherwise, I would just invite you to contact Pablo, and especially, of course, for the people who want to work together in more for nice projects. Before I close this session, I would like to draw your attention to the last lecture of this academic year organized by the Delta Futures Lab. It's next week, Friday, 25th of June, by Johannes Visser. And he did his PhD project on design methodology. And the title of his presentation is Creating New Perspective by Integrating Frames Through Design. And this looks quite theoretical, but he will show you some examples to show you how it works out. Integrating frames through design. So that is the title of his lecture, of his lunch lecture. Thank you very much, Pablo. It's good that we have your contact details. I would say, hope to see you next time. So goodbye to our other Argentinian friends and all other people listening. We hope to see you all back soon. Have a nice afternoon.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you, Martina,
Thank you.
Margios,
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.